Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another board game Cube Shelf run through. I'm JB, and today we're going to be going through another 8 fun games. A lot of these are big group games, and I'm really excited to talk about them, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start from the top once again here with Werewords. Now, Werewords has a bit of an interesting history to it. It comes from a publisher named Bezier Games, and they've done a lot of these sort of, I guess you could call them riffs on the classic folk game Werewolf. Some people call it Mafia, but Werewolf is the one I think more people know. And in that game, there's 2 teams. You have the villagers and you have the werewolves, and the villagers have to figure out who the werewolves are before they all die. And usually there's like a nighttime phase each round where one person gets offed, and then that's one less person who could be a werewolf, but that's one less person who could figure it out as well. So with Werewords, there's been a long line of these kind of variations on werewolf that Bezier has done. There was Ultimate Werewolf, and then One Night Ultimate Werewolf, and now there's this. I think there have been a few others as well. But this game was the one that interested me the most because it did a little bit more than just the traditional werewolf. It kind of blended in a game of 20 questions in the process. And the way it works is really cool. It comes with an app, a free phone app that you can download that essentially administrates the whole game for you. Now, I know not everyone likes apps in their tabletop games, but I think this is a very good use for one for a couple of reasons. One of them is that it addresses one of the qualms that I would have with classic Werewolf, where there's usually one person who's designated the narrator who administrates the game. But the trouble with being the narrator is that you're not really participating in the game. You kind of just run the game like a game master or a dungeon master. You could get around it, I suppose, and some people have tried, but it is kind of a bit cumbersome and annoying. But an app doing it helps solve that problem because the app tells you go to sleep, close your eyes, do this, wake up, open your eyes, go through these steps, and there's even a timer and a way to generate a word bank for you to use, which is the other nice benefit, is that you don't have to be bound by a bunch of cards. You can just pick a word out, and you can even increase the difficulty level or increase the time limit and change that. So the way this works, it's really cool, is that there's one player who's designated as the mayor. Now, the mayor is the one who is giving out the clues and knows what the magic word is, but they can't talk. And so it's the village team's objective to guess the word based on the clues that the mayor gives them. They can ask yes or no questions, and then they get these tokens here. You can see these are yes tokens, and there's a no token, and there's maybe tokens, or I don't know, with way off and so close, and then that's the right answer, special tokens they're thrown into the mix. So they're asking these questions, but the werewolves are mixed among them. Everybody gets one of these secret roll cards at the beginning. And the werewolves are also asking questions, but they're kind of trying to throw off everyone from the trail, so to speak. And there's also this character named the Seer who knows what the word is, but they don't want to be too obvious about it, because if they are and the village team is on the cusp of winning, then the werewolves can steal the win by guessing who the Seer is. And conversely, if the werewolves are on the cusp of winning, the village team can steal the win by guessing who they are. So it's a really neat dynamic of having to get to that answer as naturally as possible. And like I said, you can kind of mix up what the difficulty is of the words, like some of the easy ones or medium ones are things like butter or household items, whereas some of the more advanced ones are holidays or abstract concepts. I think we had, what was it? I think we had Saturnalia come up one time. I want to say that was in this game, but we never got it just because it was such a specific thing. This is a really fun game. This deluxe edition goes up to 20 players. You can get like the normal version, but you might as well get this one because it looks really cool, can handle more people, and it throws in a lot of special roles. So that's Werewords, great party game. All right, speaking of scalability, the next game we have on the list is Welcome to, or as it's formatted here in the cover, Welcome to Your Perfect Home. This is a roll and write game, but without the rolling part. Instead, I actually just played this the other day, and I forgot to put the box back on correctly. That was my bad. Oh, and I put it upside down just now. I do not know how to put boxes back together. Welcome to is, as it says right up here, a roll and write game without dice. Some people like to call these flip and fill games because you have cards that you flip over instead of dice. And this is a very interesting dynamic because it removes some of the randomness, although not all of it, because you shuffle them back together at certain points. But in this game, you're doing a very simple task. You're trying to write in numbers in these number lines here, which represent streets in a subdivision that you're developing. And the only thing that you can't do is that you can't reuse a number on the street or put the numbers out of order. So there are cards that are numbered 1 through 15 on one side, which are the house numbers. You flip one over for each of these pairs that represents an action, and then you take an action and a house number that represent one of the 3 pairs, like this one right here. So there are different actions you can do. You can separate the houses into lots by building fences. You can develop parks, which are marked over here that you get points for. Build pools in the specific houses that have the pools marked on them. You can hire a temp, which allows you to increase or decrease the value of a house number by 1 or 2, or by nothing if you just want to go with the original number. You can use the real estate agent to boost the value of lots, which you can score points for each lot at the end. And then there's these negative scoring things that allow you to do some cool stuff. You can use this one called bis, which I think is like French for... It's basically like when here in America when we say like 29 and then 29 and a half when referring to like a house number, where we insert that halfway mark there. You can reuse a number with the power of bis, but it costs points, which is not good. And there's even an advanced variant where you can add roundabouts and split the street up into 2 streets. Pretty crazy stuff, I know. But then the game ends when you either go through all the houses or you can't do an action or go through a turn 3 times, and then you total your score. Very simple game. I basically just explained it to you right there. It looks like a lot at first, but it's really not all that much. It's a pretty simple game to play. You can scale it as long as you have sheets for it. I have a few dry erase ones in here. Really, really fun. All right, now we're going to get to a couple games by the same publisher, Pretzel Games. Now, they do a lot of dexterity-focused games, and this one is one of their more well-known ones called Junk Art. Now, Junk Art is a really interesting game, and I'm not sure this is one I'm going to be keeping, and I'll get into why here in a second, but it's a really fun game, and it's actually designed by the same team who did But Wait, There's More that we talked about in the very first video. The premise of it is that there's all these pieces in the box that come in 4 different colors, and you can even see here that they come in these crazy shapes too. You have the exact same set of pieces per color, and there's cards that correlate to the pieces as well. Now, what's interesting about this is that, and this is the reason why I'm thinking about selling it, is that these cards here, there's I think about 10 of these city cards. These are essentially different games you can play in the box. So really, it's a collection of mini games that use these pieces. There's one that's kind of like a cooperative one where you're building a structure in the middle. There's one where you're handing cards to other people, so you're forcing them to put on different things onto their individual structure, and they get points for them. There's a trick-taking game with these cards that use these numbers and stuff. And I really like what's in here. The problem I have with this game is that there is a little bit of hesitance, I think, when you play a game to explain a different set of rules in the middle of what you're doing. Mainly just because it kills momentum, right? I mean, you don't want to be playing something and then all of a sudden in the middle it's like, oh, we got to stop, time for more rules. Or if you do it at the beginning, you're going to have to remember rules for 3 different games. You could play the same game 3 times and then add your score up across all 3 of them, I guess. But I don't feel like any one of these is like super deep enough on its own. I don't know. Maybe I just need to play it a few more times. But it is a fun game, and I do like how these pieces interact with each other. You see them, and you wouldn't really think that you would be able to work with these. But the way they fit together is truly pretty interesting. There are some things that you see them, and you're like, how does that even work? But then you start playing with them, and you can get all sorts of weird combos and stuff. Pretty cool. I like Junk Art. It is a fun game. But a game I like slightly more than Junk Art is this one here called Men at Work. Another Pretzel Games game. It came out just last year, and I have to say, this is the game I recommend readily to anyone who likes Jenga. if you've grown up with Jenga, the classic game of stacking blocks and then removing blocks and then having to keep the stack up as long as possible, this game is a blast. You're working as like a foreman on a construction site. There's a boss who's essentially giving out awards to people who can build the highest. I guess being unsafe is rewarded. But anyway, thematic niggles aside, this game is very interesting in that it has this element of holding your breath while something's happening. Much like Jenga, you're having to put things in a very precarious way, and it's all dictated by these cards. So each card has a back, and the backs are the ones that give you the prompt for what you're doing. You can either place a worker or a girder onto the construction site. So these long beams are the girders, and these guys are the workers. So you'll also notice that there are colors that serve as a prompt. So this girder can either be purple or black, or this worker can either be purple or red. And you're ultimately going through and getting your instructions from the next card that you flip over next to it that give you, say, hey, I'm putting a girder, I have to follow this one. I have to put a new support, the gray block here that can be the only thing touching the table, and it has to touch a different color girder, the one I'm putting on. Some of these are harder than others, like you put workers on that carry these beams on their shoulders or these tiny little bricks, and they're intentionally designed to be a little tricky and a little off-kilter so that you have to be very careful when placing them. But it's such a nail-biting game. And what I like about it is that even though it has player elimination, you have these safety certificates, and if you lose all 3 of them, then you're out. It doesn't really feel like that's an issue because there's the element of being the last person standing potentially being the winning condition, but also getting 4 of these Employee of the Month certificates. So if you feel like being risky, you could do that, but if you feel like kind of loosening up a little bit and saying, you know, I'm going to try to wait it out and do less risky things and let people, you know, kind of mess up a little bit and see what happens. If somebody messes up, then you can kind of work from the ashes and do less risky things. So you kind of got to know, you know, as Kenny Rogers says, know when to hold them and when to fold them in a game like this. It's a really cool dexterity game, very accessible, great for families. Easily one of my family recommendations. That's Men at Work. All right, halfway done with this set. We now have a couple of racing games here. This game is Downforce. Now, this is a game that's put out by a publisher with a rather interesting background, Restoration Games. Their motto is every game deserves another turn. And what they do is they take old games from the 70s and the 80s and they essentially retool them with new artwork, new mechanics, you know, a little bit of a new coat of paint, so to speak, and they present them for a more modern audience. And this game, Downforce, is actually a re-implementation of one such game called Tempo from 1974. It got reprinted in the 90s as Top Race and even got nominated for German Game of the Year, Spiel des Jahres. But Wolfgang Kramer is one of those classic designers who's been around for a while, and his original design has been re-implemented here into this really slick racing game that's honestly a lot of fun. I'm just going to stand it up there so you can see the whole track and whatnot. But what you do in this game is there's 2 parts to it. You start off by auctioning cars. Well, first of all, you deal out these cards to every player. I'm trying to see if there's a good picture of them on here, but I don't think this... Oh yeah, here they go, right there. You can see the different stripes on them. Those represent the different colors of cars, and they have different numbers on them. And you use them in an auction at the very beginning of the game to buy whatever cars or cars you're going to own in the race. Now, whatever you pay for them, unfortunately, you have to deduct from your final score. But then you go racing, and alongside the car, you're also gaining a power alongside your car to use throughout the whole race, and these can vary the game quite a bit. Now, when you go racing, you're going to play those striped cards with the different colors on them. And what's really cool about this is that you're controlling other people's cars. You're not just controlling your own. However, you're also having a vested interest in whatever cars you own, because whatever place they get, you're going to get money for. But you can also bet on cars to win at these various yellow lines. And so whenever a car gets there, you can mark a car or cars, different ones at different points if you want, to be the overall winner of the race. And by doing that, you can get money aside from the money that you get from whatever car that you own crossing the finish line. And this is really cool. It keeps everybody engaged. It has options for various strategies and tactics for points in the race. If you're not feeling like your car is going to do really well, you can fall back on somebody else's. Or maybe you can affect the race so that what you think someone else is doing in terms of bidding may not necessarily work out for them. Or, sorry, betting may not necessarily work out for them. So it's a really neat set of dynamics and player interactions. And of course, you can get all these cars in situations where there's bottlenecks and play cards that would move them otherwise, but since they're blocked, then you're essentially throwing cards away and using up good ones that could benefit somebody else. It's just a really neat system. There's also a couple of expansions that came out for it that just offer new maps. One of them has new power cards. It definitely varies the game a little bit. This is one that I'll definitely be keeping for a while. Great game, solid recommendation. Okay, next up we have another classic racing game called Camel Up. Although maybe this is not quite as much of a classic as Tempo/Top Race. This game came out a few years ago in 2014 and just ended up taking the Spiel des Jahres award, the German Game of the Year, in a year when everyone thought a game called Splendor was going to win it. And this one just kind of came out of nowhere, especially for people outside of Germany, and ended up winning it. And a lot of people didn't really know of this game, at least until it won the award, and was wondering, okay, what is up with Camel Up? Like, why is this so popular? Why did this get the jury's ultimate decision? And having played it now, I can safely say I understand why now. This game is such a crowd pleaser. It's one of those games that just evokes such strong reactions from people when playing it. Because what you're doing is, you're not really, unlike racing games like Downforce and whatnot, where you own a participant in the race, so to speak, you're not really the owners of these camels racing around this track. You're members of Egyptian royalty who are depicted on these cards here in the audience, and you're just trying to earn the most money out of the race. And so you're trying to bet on certain camels after each leg is over, when 5 dice are dispensed from this really cool pyramid thing. And on your turn, you can either dispense a die from the pyramid and move a camel forward. You can bet on the overall winner or loser, or just the winner of the leg. Or you can put one of these spectator tiles down that moves camels landing on it either forward or backward. What I like about this game is the fact that it is very lucky. Normally I wouldn't say that about a game, but this one has those crazy swings where, thanks to the fact that these camels can stack up against each other, because that's the way camels totally work in real life, I suppose, you could end up with these situations where, let's say this purple camel moved up early in a leg, hopped on top of these guys. One of them moves and carries purple over here, and purple just ends up getting carried by these other camels. And so this camel that you think would never make it in the race ends up just coming from behind to win. And when it happens, it's so satisfying to watch, because everybody is cheering for that long shot. Everybody wants to see something bonkers happen. And then this edition of the game, this is a second edition that includes a really cool 3D tree, and I highly recommend this being the version you buy if this interests you. This version includes this additional element of these crazy camels that are running the opposite direction on the track, and they have their own die. I love this because it just adds to the chaos and it adds to the uncertainty. And on top of that, it goes up to 8 players, which is fantastic. And it's really short. It's not a game that takes very long to play. It's actually a very short, very accessible racing game. And it's definitely earned a lot of fans over the years. I can see why this won the award. It's fantastic. That is Camel Up. Go check it out if it interests you, because it's a lot of fun. All right, moving on to probably my 2 favorite games here on this shelf. We have a 2-player game, kind of a break from the big, large player ones. This one is called Haname Koji, and it's a game put out by a company called Emperor S4. Their logo is here, but in America, I think Deepwater is the one that's publishing it here. But this company has made a lot of little games about, I want to say a lot of their games are about Japan or Japanese culture, if I'm not mistaken. But this one is by far and away the one that interested me the most, just because of the I cut, you choose nature of it. So the premise is that you're a restaurant owner in this old geisha street in traditional Japan who is hiring geishas to come in, and each one has a different thing that they do. So one of them plays this instrument, another one reads poetry, another one performs a tea ceremony, so on and so forth. And the premise of this game is that you have items that the geishas would use as part of what they do, and you are trying to bring in the geishas by giving them these items. And so whoever has more items in front of each one at the end of a round will put their token on their side of that one. So if you can win 4 out of the 7, there's only 6 for some reason pictured here, or you can get 11 points, each of them has a point value, which is also the number of cards associated with them, then you ultimately win the game. So it could take 1 round, it could take 3 rounds. Usually it's somewhere between those two numbers on that scale. What I like about this is that each round, you have to spend these 4 tokens here. These are action tokens, and the action tokens have you do something different. So one of them allows you to discard 2 cards out of the round completely. Another one allows you to tuck a card away for a secret card that you want to score at the very end after everything's revealed. And then the 2 other ones allow you to present cards to your opponent. In one of them, it's presenting 3, and then they take 1 and you take the other 2. And then this other one is presenting 2 sets of 2. They take 1 set, and then you take the other set, so 4 cards total get put in front of these each round. I love it, kind of like Onitama. I love that agonizing feeling of just knowing that you might be handing your opponent just what they need to win the game. You know, it's just that very crunchy decision making, and just with a few simple cards. I mean, this game only has 21 cards that you're playing with. You remove 1 from each round just so there's not a completely perfect information, kind of like Love Letter. And it's such a tense back and forth knife fight. It is such an interesting exercise in decision making and that tug of war between the 2 players, and I love it to death. One of my favorite games. This is easily in my top 10. Like, that's how much I love it. There's also another version of it called, I think it's spelled like Jixia. I don't think that's how you pronounce it. Jixia Academy, Jixia. I think it's based on like a manga, but it has like professors from that manga who are all dudes instead of the ladies here. So whichever one you want, the guys or the ladies, you can pick. This was the original one, so it's the one I'm keeping, and I really like it a lot. Haname Koji is a great 2-player game. All right, and rounding things out with a party game favorite here, we're actually going to start a series of games from publisher Repost Productions, which is a publisher out of Belgium, I believe. But this is the first one, and it's the most recent one I got in my collection, called JustOne. Now, this is a kind of a word association game where you have a placard in front of you as a player, and on your turn, if you're the active player, you have to draw a card. And the objective is that you're trying to cooperatively score as many of these cards, there's 13 in any given round, as possible. Now, there's, I think, over 100 cards. Yeah, 110 cards you could pick from, so it's going to be a fairly different game every time. But you pick a number on the card, 1 through 5, and whichever number you pick is the word you have to guess that turn. Then everybody else writes a 1-word clue to help you guess. Then they compare the words to each other. But if any of them match, they get eliminated. So you kind of want to make clues that are distinct, but yet synergize well enough. And I can't tell you just how many times this game has evoked so much laughter in the groups I have introduced it to. There was one time, I think it was the first time I played with my coworkers, we had, I think triangle was the word, and there were 4 clues. They were all different. We had equilateral, scalene, isosceles, and shape, and we all were just cheering like crazy because it was just that perfect synergy. There was another one where it was like Godfather, and we had Pacino, Brando, Corleone, and Cannoli, I think were the clues. So good. Like, we were so happy with the clues we had. It's a great game. It's a great game to kind of get into your opponent's heads a little bit. Sort of, not opponents, but your teammates' heads. Kind of like, what was it, Wavelength from the earlier shelf. This has gone over so well with every group I've introduced it to. I don't think I've ever had a group that's hated this game. It has been a blast with every single time we've played it. highly recommend this one if you want a fun family party game. All right, that is it for shelf number 4. Next time, we are going to continue the journey through Repost Productions and a few other favorites with this shelf. So until then, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring that bell to get notified of the next one. But until then, thank you once more for checking this out and for sticking through to the end, and I will see you in the next one.